We're going to be discussing how to use the case log system that the ACGME requires for you to log your procedures throughout the years. And once you kind of log into the ACGME website, this is the screen that you'll be faced with where you can actually add your cases. And I just want to encourage you to get familiar with this early on, which is the point of this video, so that you can just kind of log your cases as you go and they don't pile up and make it difficult for you to get credit for all the cases that you've done. And it's important to also note that you can do a lot of this and you can log all of your cases from your smartphone as well too. So being comfortable doing this quickly can be very advantageous early on. So in the spirit of that, let's just discuss how you actually log the cases. Once you get to this screen, you can just kind of go in order here, and we'll go through each section. A lot of it's pretty self-explanatory, but some of it's slightly nuanced. When it comes to the case ID, this is not the patient's MRN, and actually it's probably not a good idea to use PPI here. What you can do is just use any kind of coding system for yourself so you can keep the things straight. And oftentimes what you can also just do is just use a numerical system where you can start with, case 1 and just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. So find a system that works for you and stick with it so you can keep track of things. Then the date, obviously, is the date of the case, your year, the rotation. Let's say for this example, we are on the liver transplant service. Your role, this is where it can get a little confusing. First assistant is going to be, when oftentimes you're double scrubbed in or something like that, where you're just kind of assisting. The surgeon chief is when you are actually in your chief year and you're scrubbing into cases and really taking a role that a chief would. Even if you're the most senior individual on a service and you're acting chief, you can't really log cases as surgeon chief until you are in your actual literal chief year. Surgeon junior, this is kind of an important distinction from first assistant. This is when you are really the only trainee in the case, and most common example is that you are working with the attending and no one else is scrubbed in. In those instances, you would be the surgeon junior. And then teaching assistant, this is when you're a more senior resident and you're actually taking a very active role in teaching more junior residents major components of a case. So just make sure you're kind of familiar with these roles and that you log cases appropriately, because it does, kind of reflect a different level of involvement in the case. So early on, you'll probably be logging a lot of first assistants, and then, as you work with attendings directly and solely, surgeon juniors, and maybe you'll do some teaching assistant roles, and then in your chief year, you'll be logging cases as surgeon chief. Institution is pretty straightforward. Our liver transplant service is at Moffitt, so that's what we'll put here. For the attending, just obviously who was the attending on the case. Let's say we're working with Dr. Roll here. Patient type, you can kind of distinguish. This was, let's say, an adult case. And then here in the comment section, it can be useful for you to just include some comments for the cases that are useful for you, or can explain things if anyone kind of wants to ask you about the case that you logged. So let's say, we did a liver biopsy. Something like that. I think it's really up to you how extensive you want that to be. And then here you're going to log the code. So these are the codes that the ACGME tracks. And this is kind of the whole point of what you're doing here. You're logging the case so you can kind of log cases under certain codes. So let's say, we were doing a wedge liver biopsy here. So then we find the actual case and the code, and we add it to the case. And now what we can do is submit the case here. Now, before we actually submit the case, the important thing is that if you did more than one thing in the case, you can add multiple codes. It's just that you can only really get credit for one component of the case at a time with the current way things are set up. So if you log multiple codes, it will ask you to, let's just say, we log this one as well too. This is not a trackable code, so this isn't going to really make too much of a difference. But let's just, we're just going to log some other thing for the liver. I'll just put a liver here. If we have another, let's say something like this, just for the sake of our example here, what we're going to have to do after we log a few things is we'll have to designate what's our primary code. This is the code that you're going to get credit for. And then, also before we kind of submit our case, what we can also do is if you're on a particular service and you're going to be logging a lot of cases, you can actually make a template. So here we can make a liver transplant template here that we can save. So the next time we can just go to the liver transplant section here under our templates, and it will just pre-populate everything. So once you do this, you can kind of submit. Here, we can kind of submit our case here, and that's pretty much it. That's how you log your cases. And then, now that we have our template, the next time we go, we can just populate everything in the liver transplant template, and can kind of make things a little bit more expedient there as well.